Good morning. Well, today I want to share a couple of dreams that I had when I was younger. And also, I want to share an encounter with Jesus where he came to me at work when I was in my 20s. I didn't see him, but I knew he was there. Anyway, I was just thinking this morning about how you know, our country is in such a state of distress and all the things. And today is actually the day of prayer at the mall. There's a couple of, Jonathan Kahn is there, Rabbi Jonathan Kahn is there doing a prayer call, and Franklin Graham is there doing a prayer call, and how, our country really needs to turn back to God and how important it is for us to understand, God's work in our life and how, He really is personal. He can be personal to each one of us. So today I wanted to share a dream when I was either 16 or 17 when, the Lord just showed me how personal he really could be. Now, this dream would not actually play out for another 10 years in my life, but it literally played out just like watching a movie. So anyway, I was about 16 or 17. I can't remember exactly, but it was in that time frame. I was actually going through one of the dreams this morning, just reading through it just to refresh myself. I mean, I remember it vividly, but there was just little details about it that, that I had forgotten about. But anyway, in my dream, this one might have been in vision too. I'm not sure because it was so real. Oh my gosh, it was so real. But in my vision dream, whatever it was, I'm in this sports car, and the funny thing about that is when I was young, I hated sports cars. When all throughout high school, I remember, some of the guys, some little jock guys would drive around in sports cars and stuff, and they just really, it was like a big turn off to me. So that's kind of funny. But in my dream, I'm in this sports car with a man, and I cannot see his face. He's driving the car. He's a dark-headed man with a mustache is all I could see. He was just, dark-headed. And I'm in the passenger car, and he's driving, and all of a sudden we pull up to this huge castle-looking house. Maybe not a castle like Disneyland castle, but it was like an older, brick castle looking house. And we pull up, and there's this rounded driveway, and at this house. And in my dream, I knew that this was my husband. And in my dream, it seemed like we maybe were on vacation because we pulled up to this house. And then we got out of the car. My husband and I got out of the car. And he opened the trunk, and we were pulling out all these suitcases like we were going to go stay in this house. And so in my dream, we pull out the suitcases, we walk into this house. I see there was like literally a blonde-headed lady that when we got to the door, it was like we were almost staying like at a motel, not really a motel, but like it was maybe like a bed and breakfast, but it was like a castle looking house. And so this lady answered the door. She let us in. A blonde-headed lady answered the door, and then we were taken up this staircase up to the top of a second floor, and we walked into the bedroom, and there was a 4-poster bed in there, and we put all our luggage in there. And then the next thing I know is I woke up praying in the spirit so loud that I woke our entire household up, and everybody comes running in my bedroom trying to figure out if I'm okay, because I literally just come out of the dream just praying like so loud, like almost like screaming in prayer. And so that dream, and I used to, and I told my mom about the dream, and so from that time on, when I was 16 or 17, I always called this dark-headed man in my dreams my dream man. Anyway, I ended up actually marrying another guy for 2 or 3 years, and he was a dark-headed guy, but it wasn't the guy of my dreams. And maybe later on I'll tell you about that. But Anyway, so then, like I said, that was when I was 16 or 17. And then when I was about probably 24, 25, 26, I'm thinking more like 25, 26. It was probably about a year or so before I ended up moving to Mississippi. So I had this second dream that I didn't know at the time that would actually play into the first dream. So in the second dream, I think it might have been a vision also, because it was also so real. And in the second dream I had, there was two angels with me. They were probably about 6-ish, 6.5 foot tall, maybe. And these two, they were blonde headed. They were both blonde headed, and they literally looked like they could be brothers, or maybe not, maybe twins, but they definitely looked, they favored. And so in my dream, they came and got me, and I knew they were going to take me somewhere on a journey. Basically, I knew that. And I knew from these two angels, like one was on my right and one was on my right and one was on my left. And they took my arms and like they linked arms with me and they started walking. And like I literally had no idea where we were going. I was just following them. And so the first part of the dream, they led me to a ferry boat. And I had never been on a ferry boat in my life. I mean, I probably had seen them in movies or something. But anyway, so we walked onto this ferry boat. And we went across this great water. And so then once we got to the other side of this water, we then stepped off of the ferry. And right off of the ferry, we step onto the land, and it's like a jungle. It's like we had come to a jungle. And all of a sudden, these angels both of them had a machete in their hand. And both of them were clearing the path. Now, at this point, they weren't actually both holding my arms. They had walked with their machetes and they started clearing off the path for us. They were making a path for us to be able to walk through this jungle, just like, the leaves, and because it was just it was just brush and brush, it was like a jungle. So they completely, cleared a place for me, and we walked, and it seemed like forever of just walking through this jungle. And so then, then we got through the jungle, and we came next, and I was so thankful we'd come to kind of a clearing point. And then we kept walking through this clearing, and all of a sudden I saw a cave. It was like a mountain. It was like actually a mountain, and then inside the mountain was a cave. And so then they took us into the cave, and for the first time in my dream, I felt fearful, because I had not felt fearful up until that point, because the angels were with me. But the minute we stepped into that cave, and although I knew they were with me, we stepped into complete darkness. It was just completely dark. It was like I couldn't see anything. Like I had no idea where I was going whatsoever. And all I had was just these two angels guiding me, leading me. And I remember as we went through this cave, we wove in and, and around and turned, and there was twist and turn. And it seemed like, just like the jungle part, it seemed like it went on and on forever. And finally, we took this one drastic turn, and all of a sudden I looked, and I could see at the end, I could see a light. And I knew in my dream at that point that light represented the Lord, and that at the end of this darkness, that the Lord would be there, and it would be like, I don't know, I just knew it would be life-changing for my life. So anyway, so that's my second dream, and I hope I don't forget to tie in how that came together. So now move on to a third encounter, and literally all three of these things tied together, which is so crazy, because one happened, like I said, at 16 or 17. The second one happened when I was about 25, 26. And then 24, 25 to 6, something like that. Anyway, and then the third one happened when I was the end of when I was 25 or the beginning of when I had just turned 26. And I think it was around the beginning of when I had turned 26, because that's when everything in my life literally took a change, a turn. So in this experience, it wasn't a dream, it was actually an experience. So after I had not married, I had married another man. And we were just two immature kids. I mean, you know, we weren't bad. We were just immature. We just made immature choice. We got married too young, you know, and so we ended up divorcing, and this was just devastating. I had a little girl, and it was just devastating. And not only that, I had lost a child. When we first got married, we got pregnant not too long after we first got married, and I had a little boy, and he passed away at 7 months old. He had a infection in his bloodstream, and he got sick in the middle of the night. Woke up the next morning and he was sick, and I thought he was cutting teeth. He was 7 months old, but we ended up rushing him to the hospital when he was about 9 o'clock that morning, and about 3 o'clock in the afternoon he had passed away. And when they ran blood tests on him, whatever kind of infection he had ended up going into his bloodstream, and he passed away. So I went through a very dark season for a year after that. Actually, the day, and my little boy's name was Justin, and I remember, you know, the day after he passed away, and and it's just like my whole life was just crushed, completely crushed. You know, I mean, there's just no way to explain losing a baby, a child. It is just the worst. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. You know, the most evil. I wouldn't wish it on the most evil person, to be honest with you. It is just the most painful thing. For a year after that, though, I went through a very dark place. But in the very beginning, when, like, the day after Justin passed away, I loved the Lord so much. And I remember the day after he passed away, and I knew we had to go through all the preparations and the funeral and all that. And I remember going into my bedroom and looking into the mirror and looking myself in the eye. And I was making a statement to myself, but also at God at the same time. And the scripture came to me, and I wanted to say it to myself. And the scripture is, though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. And that's what I was telling the Lord. And I was telling myself, though he will slay me, yet I will trust in him. And so that night, after we came back from doing some stuff, you know, I don't remember, because it's such a blurry time, you know, when my son passed away. But I remember going back to bed, and I just thought I was going to die. Like, literally, I just thought I was going to die. And, you know, just the pain was so great. And I remember laying in bed that night, and the Lord spoke to me so clearly. And, you know, I remember, you know, laying in bed praying, Lord, please just take me so I can be with my son. Just take me to heaven so I can be with Justin. And the Lord said, Susan, he said, you're not going to die. I'm not going to take you. He says, because I have another plan for your life. And you are going to have a baby. And you are going to have a baby by June. Well, this was in July, in July of this season. My daughter, she's like in her 30s now, Danae, she was born on June the 1st. So that promise did happen, but before that happened, that next year was extremely hard. So at this point, though, before I had this encounter in the office, I'm working for a little computer company, and because of everything I had gone through with my son, the divorce, you know, my daughter, you know, being young and having to go back and forth, you know, it was just so hard for her. I felt like the biggest failure ever. I felt the failure as being a daughter. I felt like a failure at being a wife. I felt like a failure at being a mom. I felt like a failure of being a child of God, and like not living up to the expectations, because I'd gone through a divorce. You know, I'd been raised to never go through a divorce. So I felt like a failure. I felt depressed. I felt hopeless. I had even asked my mom and dad, you know, during this season, you know, just pray that I die, because I'm in so much pain. I just don't even know if I can live, you know. So my parents, they probably didn't even know what to do with me, to be honest with you. And I don't blame them. I can't imagine my child asking me to pray that I would die, you know. But during that season, God used my little girl, Danae, so many times. It would be so many times when I would be just so depressed and going through so much pain, and she would speak something to me. She would say, Mommy, this, and this, and it would just be just like a word from heaven, just like a word from God. Anyway, so I remember for months, I was just so like broken, and I remember praying, God, I'm just how can my life just be such a broken mess? How can my life just be such a broken mess? Because I'm a Christian. How can a Christian, someone that loves God, how can their life be so destroyed and so broken and so horrific? And, how could I be such a failure? How could I have missed your voice? How could I have missed your, call? All the things that you say, the shame that builds up, And so this had gone on for several months, like I said, of just this feeling, actually I don't even, I did come out of the depression a little bit when my daughter was born, but, after Justin passed away, but still, like, for several years after that, I was never the same. I was never that little girl that I was, before I got married and before, I went through all the pain. And so anyway, so I'm sitting in this office, I'm a single mom at this point, and I was like the office manager, so I was literally there by myself all the time. And so, during the day when everybody was gone, I would listen to Christian radio and stuff, and I would pray all the time, just pray, just pray and ask God to give me direction. And one day, as clear as I'm speaking in this, today to y'all, I heard the voice of God. He walked in my office, and it was like the atmosphere shifted in that office. I did not see him, but I felt him, and I could hear his voice. And he said, Susan, the reason why your life is such a mess, and there's so much destruction, and there's so much chaos, is because you have made me Savior, but you have never made me Lord. I was so taken aback by that statement because I had never even heard that statement before. I was raised as a little Pentecostal girl, and we had never actually, it's a little bit different than Baptist, because what we heard in Pentecostal church was, repent, get baptized, and receive the Holy Spirit. We were never told, to make Jesus Lord of your life. And so at that moment, when the Lord spoke, you have never made me Lord, all of a sudden, the revelation of that truth opened up to me. And the Lord continued to speak to me. And he said, Susan, he said, if you will make me Lord, and if every decision you make, you will come to me, and you will let me make those decisions, and you will let me guide you, and you will let me lead you. All this chaos and all this destruction in your life will completely be turned around. And he said, it will not happen overnight. Because there is a lot of stuff that you have, that's caused all the things. He said, but if you will step by step walk with me through this, he said, your life you will turn around one day, and you will not recognize the person you are anymore. And he said, I want you to do something. I want you to send your ex-husband and his family. I want you to send them letters telling them how sorry you are for all the pain that your decisions have caused in everybody's life. And I was like, but Lord, they have hurt me too. And he said, well, that doesn't matter. He said, because I am telling you, if you want to have freedom, I'm telling you to ask them to forgive you. And I am telling you to forgive them regardless of what happens. Because anytime there's divorce, there is pain. Whether anybody does anything wrong on purpose or not, because I don't think anybody did anything wrong on purpose. There is just pain. There's pain when there's a division that comes. So I did that. I wrote a letter. And a few months down the road, I get a call from my ex-father-in-law, and he's living in Mississippi, and I am living in Texas. And he says, Susan, he said, I have this company. He said, he sold tomatoes to stores and to restaurants and stuff. And he said, I want you to come to Mississippi and work for me. And I was like, I don't know. Let me pray about that. Well, of course, when I get out, it was really nice on the phone. But when I got off the phone, I was like, are you crazy? Yes, I love you guys. And, but I don't want to leave my family. My family's here. But then I heard this still small voice say, Susan, are you making a decision without me? And I was like, oh, Lord, I was. And so I determined in my heart when I heard that to pray. And so I went home after work every night. I would go to work and pick up my daughter and then go home, fix her supper. And then then I would lay before the Lord every day in my living room and I would pray. And this was several days. It was maybe even a week. I don't know. It was several days that I prayed, and I did not make a decision until I heard from God. And the Lord spoke to me so clearly. And he said, Susan, he said, I want you to go. He said, I want you to give your daughter the gift of having a relationship with her dad where she doesn't have to fly back and forth to Mississippi, where it's not hard. He said, just like you had a good relationship with your dad, I want you to make sure that your daughter has a good relationship with her dad. And I was like, but God, that's so hard because my whole family's here. And he was like, yes. He said, sometimes when you make decisions, they're hard. He said, but what did I tell you? That I would be with you and I would go before you and I would make all your paths straight. He said, and it doesn't mean that it won't be hard, but it means I will be with you. And when you're obedient to my will, he said, you will look back and you will understand one day why I have led you in this direction. You will know why. And he said, I do not ask anyone to leave, that I don't repay them with houses, with land, with their brothers and their sisters, all being a part of this plan. There's a scripture in the Bible that says anything you do for God, that you will not lose that, but in this lifetime you will gain brothers and sisters and houses and cars. Not cars, but houses and land. And so I was like, okay. I was like, but Lord, if I go to Mississippi and I leave my family, you're going to have to help my family because they're not going to understand, because they have watched me be so broken. I have been such a broken person. And I'm like, and now they see me for the first time in my life and I'm finally healing. I have found a church. I have found a group of young adults. I am finally, for the first time in my life, I've got friendships. I'm finally getting everything on track. And he was like, Susan, sometimes when you make decisions, you can't please everybody. And so I told my parents, and I have never been so devastated in my life watching my parents be broken and cry. And I remember the day that I pulled out of Mississippi in my little red Toyota, and I remember my dad crying his eyes out as he waved goodbye to my little girl. It was her birthday that day. We moved June 1st, and she was 4 years old that day. But it was the time. It was time. It was a new season. And so we drove to Mississippi, got to Mississippi. And, I went to work. And 2 weeks, well, actually a week after I got here, I went to work for my father-in-law, my ex-father-in-law, and they were just so wonderful to me at the time. And he said, there's this account in town that we've been trying to get. It's a huge account. And this account, if we got it, he sold tomatoes. So I would have to go to this huge grocery place. And the buyer, the produce buyers, I would have to go up there and I would have to bring some tomatoes and just see if I could get their account. And so I didn't know anything about tomatoes. The only thing I knew about tomatoes is you put them on hamburgers, y'all. I mean, seriously, I was just... I just didn't know anything. Honestly, it was like this. I'm just telling you how God can use anything in your life. And he takes the most simple things, and he blesses them. When you put something in God's hands and you're obedient to God, he will bless you. So I was like, okay. So I called this company up and I got an appointment to see, the two guys that were the buyers for the produce. And so I walked up so I had to go to a warehouse downtown Jackson, and it wasn't too far from where I worked. We had a big office in the farmer's market downtown Jackson, Mississippi. So I walked up these stairs. It was on the second, the office was on the second floor. So I walked up this office, and, walked into this office where the men in the warehouse had told me it was at. And when I opened the door to this office, I see two men sitting there, and I looked to my left in a desk, and these desks were sitting, facing each other. But I looked to my left, there was a man. It was a dark-headed man with a mustache, and he had a little picture of the cutest little boy on his desk. And this thought, literally, it's like I heard this voice in my head. Well, wouldn't that young man be a nice man to marry? And I was like, no, it wouldn't, because he's got a little boy on his desk. That's a married man right there. That was what I thought, So anyway, I sit there and I'm, talking about our company and about tomatoes, and they could tell that I was green all day long about knowledge. I didn't know anything about it, but they were just kind of picking on me. And literally, this brown-headed man, his name was Bobby Cower, which is now my husband. But he was doing everything he could to make it hard on me in that office. And I was just getting madder by the moment. But of course I couldn't tell, I couldn't act like it because I was trying to get their account, And so when I left there, I was so discouraged. I thought, I will never get that account. They know that I am stupid. They know that I don't know anything, But a couple days later, he called me. And he said, we might just give you a try. Just maybe buy a few boxes, He said, but first, he said, I want to, take you out and talk about it. He said, can we just meet for lunch? He said, I want to go over some stuff. And I was like, oh, I didn't really want to mix, I don't know. I just felt so intimidated. I didn't really want to mix business, what I thought was pleasure. Cause I could kind of tell that he was, flirting with me a little bit. And I was like, oh, I didn't really want to do it, but I knew I had to get this account because this account would really shift everything about my job, and it would really help, and it would help our company. And so I went out to lunch with him, and he was just the nicest guy. I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't the same guy that that I met last week. I mean, he's just really, really nice. And so he decided he'd buy a few boxes of tomatoes from us. And I mean, oh my gosh, my ex-father-in-law, my boss, he was just thrilled, So a few more days went by, and I could, and it was like all of a sudden, this guy, Bobby, my husband now, he just kept flirting with me. And I'm like, I'm just going to have to let him know I do not mix business with pleasure, but I'm just trying to, walk on eggshells right now because, because I don't want to lose his account and make him mad, So it was kind of I was in a hard place, between a rock and a hard place for sure. So he said, hey, he called me one morning. He said, hey, I have to run to my bosses, the owner of the whole company. He said, I've got to go to their house. He said, I'm bringing something over to the wife. It was like her anniversary or something. He said, why don't you ride over there with me? He said, I think you will really love their house. He said, they live in a very unique house. And I was like, that is just a strange thing. I didn't know, So I was like, okay, my ex-father-in-law, he was like, you really need to go because, we really need this account. So I was like, okay, so, kind of dragging my feet, I went, because I could just tell that all I was doing was just putting fuel on the fire with this guy that was really, he was interested more than account. I started kind of feeling like, well, he's probably buying from me because he's trying to get me to date him, So I was like being very resistant, hesitant, and all this. So, but I thought, okay. So anyway, so he pulls up and he comes in, and we walk outside, and we get into this Blue IROC Z, and we head to his bosses, or the owners of this huge company. It's a huge company. It was like 200 stores, So he was the buyer of like 200 stores of produce. So it was a big deal, So it was like a big account. Like, that's a lot of merchandise. I could not risk not getting this account, So anyway, so we drove, and all of a sudden, he's like, it's just right around the corner. And so all of a sudden, we pull up, and I look, and I see a circle driveway. I see what looks like a castle. And I'm like, oh my goodness. I am sitting in the car of the man that's going to be my future husband. I sucked all the air out of the car. I went, oh my God. Like that, because I was so taken aback. And he looked at me, he's like, what? Like, what? And I was like, nothing, nothing, because I didn't want to tell him what I knew was going to happen, and it freaked me out so bad. And he's like, no, what's wrong? He's like, I was like, I cannot tell you. I was like, I just literally cannot tell. He's like, tell me. I was like, well, I've been in this house before. He's like, you have? And I was like, well, I was like, yeah, I said, in a dream. He's like, he was like, he couldn't understand, so I told him, I said, okay, well, I'm going to tell you this. I said, I don't want you to freak out. I said, it's the craziest thing. So I told him my dream. I said, I had this dream years ago. I was about 16 or 17 years old. I dreamed that I was with my husband in this blue sports car. I didn't know what kind of car it was. I said it was a blue sports car. And I didn't like sports cars. So I was like, that is so weird, because usually a guy in a sports car would have really been a turn off to me. I like trucks and, Anyway, so he listened intently to the dream, and I said, and I can prove that I've been here. And, I said in this dream, I said, because I can tell you what's upstairs. I said, in my dream, there was a 4-poster bed. And he was like, there is. And I said, yeah, and there's going to be a blonde-headed lady that's going to answer the door. And he's like, yes, that's the owner. Yeah. And I was like, I know. I said, I've been in that house. I've walked through that house. I said, I know exactly what it looks like. And anyway, I have to tell you this part, because the name of the company was Jitney Jungle. So remember my dream. In my dream, we went over the water, and Mississippi, the Mississippi River. So it was like, from Texas to Mississippi, we went over the water. So then we walked through the jungle. And so after that point, Bobby and I, we literally began dating. He was already trying to get me to date him anyway. So we started dating, and I was actually open to the fact, of dating him. And, like my whole perspective just shifted at that point, that, oh my goodness, God has a plan. God really has a plan. And because of my past, and because of all the dreams and visions and the things that I'd had in my past, I knew that I could trust God's plan more than my own. I knew that God had led me to Mississippi when I didn't really want to go. So literally 2 weeks after I came to Mississippi, God led me to my husband, and he said, you'll know one day why you have to go. Because I sure, was scared to death to go into, to territory where I didn't have friends, except for just, my ex-husband's family. And, but, I wanted to have my own friends. And so, anyway, so we started dating, and a couple months after we started dating, he asked me to marry him, and we ended up getting married about 6 months in. We met in June, and we were married in January. I'm not saying I would tell anybody to do that, but we did it, and it worked out. And we went through some rough times because we had both been divorced before, but here we are, almost 30 years later, and we're still married. And just when you look back and you see all the miracles, and I just have to share this little miracle too, to kind of tie it up, how I shared how when the Lord told me that you don't leave, you don't obey God, that he doesn't give you in this lifetime houses and land and brothers and sisters. Well, I felt like when the Lord told me that I believed with all my heart that God would send my mother, my father, and my brothers and my sisters to live here. Well, my brother and my sisters to live here one day. And now my brother isn't living here yet, but my mother and dad ended up moving here when my dad retired. Both of my sisters ended up moving here, and their husbands and their families ended up moving here before, several years after that. But, we all live here in Mississippi now, and God has used Mississippi to bless our family so much. We are so close. And, just seeing the blessings of God and his promises confirmed. And, the place we were living in Texas was oil field, and and my dad was an electrician in the oil field, and just before they retired, during that season, you have season when you're in the oil field where there's seasons of lots of work, and then there's seasons when there's not a lot of work. And I mean, it's just how, it is in the oil business. But, during the time before my family moved here, it was just a season of dryness, as far as in the oil field and stuff. So, one of my sisters moved here, and she didn't have a job, but one of my friends, she said, tell her if she moves here, she'll get a job. My boss already said he'd hire her. And he didn't know her from Adam. They didn't know her from Adam. They just knew me. So, but anyway, my sister had a promise of a job, and she moved here. This is my baby sister. Her and her husband moved here. And And then my other sister and her husband ended up moving. I don't know if it was a couple of years, 1 or 2 years. I don't remember how many years after that. I have to look back at my, ask them. But and then my other sister, when my other sister and her husband drove into town, my brother-in-law was offered a job as they drove into town. I'm just talking about the miraculous. My dad growing, when he was working, when he was little, he used to work in a grocery store, and he always wanted to go back and work in the grocery business, even though he had been an electrician in the oil field for years. And so he got to go back and work at a grocery store as, when he retired. And, he's passed on now, but it just shows you all the promises, of God and how he fulfills the longings of our heart. And anyway, so I'm closing this up because it's gone longer, but it just takes a while to kind of share the dreams, and then how they played out in my life, and how how God used the dream of the angel. Oh, in the dark cave, I didn't share that part. But when Bobby and I got married, there was we had a lot of, it was a season of, before, I served God, but there was a lot of things that we went through that were so hard, working through your own personal issues. And it was darkness at times, and we didn't always see the end of the tunnel, but both of us came so closer to God. As moving to Mississippi was the best thing I ever did, because I found a relationship with God, like it got stronger and stronger. And God led me to some people that I'll share later on that literally unveiled Christ in my life in a way that, that I had no understanding before. But that Christ, I guess the ultimate goal, maybe that's what I wanted to share. Through that tunnel, when I could not see anything, I could not find my way, the ultimate goal at the end of that tunnel was Christ. I knew when we turned a corner, in that tunnel in my dream, that it was light, and that I was fixing to meet the Lord. And that's exactly what happened when I was obedient and came to Mississippi. I met the Lord in a way that I had never known him, truly never known him. I had seen a couple of instances of him, of when I went to heaven, and when he come to that office, and even though I didn't see him, I had felt that encounter, like an encounter with him. But I didn't have a walk that was, that manifested that on a daily basis like I have now. And after I'd learned, by coming to Mississippi and meeting people that taught me how to have that encounter with God, and how to have a walk with God, and that he was the ultimate goal. He is the ultimate goal in our life, and should always be the ultimate goal. And we will, one day get to heaven. So he is our ultimate reward. But anyway, I want to end it with that, and just say, I hope, that in this season, when there's so much going on, that, that will give you hope, that, that even though we can't see, the end from the beginning, but that God always has a good end if we obey him, if we make him Lord of our life and not just Savior. And it's a huge difference, because when you make him Lord, your decisions are not yours anymore. That your opinions are not yours anymore. They are God. They belong to God, because we love him. And ultimately, God's truth and the decisions he makes for us are always so much better than the decisions we make without him. Anyway, that's going to be all for today. Thank y'all, and God bless you.